On a Tuesday morning in September 1992, Frank Donnelly stood at the edge of a swamp watching his career sink into the mud. 3 days earlier, his company's newest excavator, a Caterpillar 375, $600,000 of hydraulic power, had broken through what surveyors promised was solid ground and dropped like a stone, its 60-ton weight punching through dry crust into bottomless black muck. Now it sat like a wounded dinosaur, buried to its cab, sinking another inch every hour. Frank had tried everything. 2 Caterpillar D8 bulldozers chained to the machine had pulled until one chain snapped like a gunshot. The excavator hadn't moved an inch. A recovery company from Des Moines brought a 50-ton winch anchored to a concrete foundation half a mile away. The winch screamed, the cable stretched, and the anchor ripped out of the ground. The excavator sank another 6 inches. A crane operator took one look at the swamp and refused to get within 100 feet of the edge. "You want 2 machines stuck instead of 1? A sky crane cost $15,000 an hour and was in Minnesota. Insurance didn't cover operator error. Frank stood with his engineers, bleeding $20,000 a day, out of options. That's when the John Deere tractor pulled up. Walter Brennan was 73 years old and had farmed the 400 acres bordering this construction site for half a century. He'd watched the crew struggle for 3 days, waiting to see if they'd figure it out. They hadn't. So Walter climbed down from his tractor and walked over to Frank Donnelly. "Thought I might be able to help," he said. "I can pull that out." Frank looked at the worn overalls, the mud-caked boots, the weathered 73-year-old face. He laughed. "With what, Grandpa? Your John Deere? That excavator weighs 60 tons. Not with the John Deere. With my steamer. Case 1912 model. 110 horsepower. She's been in my family 80 years. The laughter spread. Engineers chuckled. Workers stopped to listen. Frank wiped his eyes. "You want to pull out my $600,000 excavator with a steam tractor from 1912? Buddy, I've got bulldozers that make more horsepower than your whole farm. They couldn't move it an inch. Your machines make horsepower," Walter said calmly. "Mine makes torque. There's a difference. Horsepower is how fast you can do work. Torque is how much work you can do. Your bulldozers spin fast, but they can't grip. They're designed for pushing dirt on solid ground. My steamer was built to pull threshing machines through muddy fields all day. 6-foot drive wheels with steel cleats. Weighs 22 tons herself. She doesn't spin. She grips." Frank shook his head. "I've got a real problem, and I don't have time for, you've had 3 days." Walter interrupted quietly. "You've tried bulldozers, winches, a crane that wouldn't even get close. You're out of options. I'm not charging you anything. If it doesn't work, you've lost an hour. If it works, make a donation to the Clayton County Historical Society." Frank looked at his engineers. They shrugged. "Fine. Bring your museum piece." It took Walter 2 hours to fire up the steam engine. You couldn't just start a steamer. You had to build a fire, heat the water, let the pressure build slowly. By noon it was ready. Walter drove it down the county road at 5 miles per hour, black smoke rising from the stack, steam hissing from the valves. Drivers pulled over to stare. The construction crew heard it before they saw it. First a deep, rhythmic chuffing, like the breathing of some enormous animal. Then ground vibration as the steel cleats bit into gravel. Then the whistle, a shriek of steam that made every head turn. The engine crested the rise overlooking the site, and everyone just stared. The machine was enormous. The boiler gleamed black, freshly painted. Brass fittings caught the September sun. The drive wheels, 6 feet tall, studded with cleats, turned slowly as Walter guided the engine down toward the swamp. Frank stood with his arms crossed. His smile had gotten smaller. "Jesus Christ," one of the engineers muttered. Walter drove to the edge of the swamp, set the brake, and began uncoiling chain from the back of the machine. Chain with links as thick as a man's wrist. "That chain won't hold," an engineer said. "We snapped a cable rated for 50 tons. This one's rated for 80, Walter said. "And it's got give. Steel cable doesn't stretch. When it hits its limit, it snaps. Chain stretches a little first. Gives you time to back off." He walked the chain out through the mud toward the excavator, his boots sinking with each step. By the time he waded back, he was covered in mud to his chest. He didn't seem to notice. He climbed up onto the engine's platform, checked his pressure gauges, and put his hand on the throttle. Walter opened it. The steam engine responded with a sound nobody on that site had ever heard. A deep, resonant chunk as the pistons drove, the gears engaged, 80 years of engineering coming to life. The drive wheels started to turn. They didn't spin. The steel cleats bit into the ground like teeth, each one finding purchase in the solid earth beneath the surface mud. The chain went taut-I in the cab of the stuck excavator. The dashboard rattled. The whole machine groaned. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the excavator moved. An inch. Maybe 2. But it moved, forward, out of the hole that had trapped it for 3 days. Walter pushed the throttle further. The chuffing grew louder. The cleats tore into the ground, throwing mud behind them. The chain hummed with tension. The excavator moved again, a foot, then another foot. The construction crew was screaming, not in panic but in disbelief. 5 feet. 10 feet. The excavator was rising, mud releasing its grip with a series of sucking sounds, the tracks emerging black and dripping. 20 feet. 30 feet. It was out. Walter pulled it another 100 feet to solid ground, then closed the throttle and let out the whistle. The sound echoed across the Iowa flatland. A triumphant scream, the same sound that had announced Harvest Cruise 100 years ago. The crew erupted. Frank Donnelly stood absolutely still. His face had gone pale. He looked at the steam engine, then at his excavator sitting on solid ground for the first time in 3 days, then at the old man covered in mud on the platform of a machine from 1912. He didn't say a word. Frank showed up at Walter's farm the next morning. Walter was in the barn cleaning mud off the wheels when Frank's shadow fell across the floor. "I came to apologize," Frank said. "Nothing to apologize for. I laughed at you in front of my whole crew. Called your machine a museum piece. Called you Grandpa. You did. I was wrong." A pause. "How did you know it could do what nothing else could?" Walter leaned against the engine's massive wheel. "Your equipment is designed to protect itself. When it senses too much load, it backs off. When the wheels start to slip, the computer cuts power. Smart engineering prevents damage, extends machine life. But it means there's a limit. It'll work up to a point, and then it stops. It won't destroy itself trying." He patted the iron boiler. "My steamer doesn't know any better. It just pulls. The only computer is me, and I know when to stop and when to keep going." Frank was quiet. "I spent 30 years in this business. Always believed newer was better. More technology meant more capability. Yesterday, a machine from 1912 did what my $1 million equipment couldn't." "Your equipment is better for most things," Walter said. "Faster, more precise, easier to operate. But there are some jobs where the old ways still work best. The trick is knowing which jobs those are." Frank wrote a check for $10,000 to the Clayton County Historical Society without hesitating. Over the next 5 years, Walter and his 1912 case pulled out 11 pieces of modern equipment that nothing else could move. Excavators, bulldozers, cement trucks, grain trucks, combines. He never charged. Every rescue ended with a donation to the Historical Society. By 1997, The society had enough to build a proper museum. The plaque on Walter's engine read, Case Steam Traction Engine, 1912. This machine was built before World War I and is still working today. It has rescued over $1 million in modern equipment from situations that modern technology couldn't solve. Some things don't become obsolete. They just wait for people to remember why they were built. Walter died in 2001, sitting on his porch with a cup of coffee and a small smile. The steam engine was visible from where he sat. His son Martin took over the farm and the engine, and still fires it up once a month, still takes it to county fairs, still never says no when someone calls with equipment stuck in an impossible place. In 2015, Martin pulled out another Caterpillar excavator, this one belonging to Frank Donnelly's grandson, who had made exactly the same mistake in exactly the same swamp. Your grandfather warned me about this place, the young man said, watching the engine work. Said the only thing that could get equipment out of here was your family's machine. What did you say? I said that was ridiculous. We have better technology now. Martin smiled. And how did that work out? About like you'd expect? The young man shook his head. Some things don't become obsolete. They just wait for people to forget, and then they remind us. Martin shut down the engine and let out the whistle. The sound echoed across the Iowa flatland, the same sound it had made for over 100 years, and would make for 100 more.